in a sense, if we look at the BRICS movement and movement of countries in Asia and in Africa that also are looking for policies that allows them to extricate themselves from these political games, then I mean Costa Rica is a case to learn from.
Right, because it is also true that the Costa Rica's decision had an impact in the region. Um, Panama abolished its army in 1990. Um, and part of the reasons was that there was absolutely not breath coming from its neighboring country. And then because of the Darien jungle, it's impossible to invade from Colombia, at least on the ground. So, and then Costa Rica was key for the Central American peace process because it was the only country that could mediate there, that it was part of the region, it was not in conflict with anybody, and it was able to bring the parties together and bring the Central American conflict to an end in 1986 or 87, the Esquipulas Treaty, an Esquipulas Treaty. So, and then if you look at Costa Rica in international organisms, it's normally given preference or the presidency of the table when dealing with issues of peace or demilitarization. I mean, it works beyond. I want to show my disagreement with something I read recently. You sent me some very interesting pieces, but there is this piece that frames neutrality as a selfish act, and I have to absolutely disagree. It is in the effort of providing a friendly and peaceful environment for contending parties that neutrality has to be understood. It is an effort to remain independent beyond and before any pressure or circumstance, so things do not escalate. You know, I think it is anything selfish in neutrality. It is on the contrary. One of the interesting things the Supreme Court said in the Iraqi ruling that the government has not really followed is that because of Costa Rica's peace policy, and again, neutrality being just part of it, Costa Rica is in, and Costa Rica neutrality was issued as ideologically active, which means that Costa Rica has an obligation to consistently pursue peace. So Costa Rican neutrality doesn't prevent the country from every kind of involvement in conflicts of others. It does allow the country to intervene to find a peaceful solution. It is the only way Costa Rica can get involved in a conflict of others is to try to bring them together and to bring a peaceful solution to the conflict, which is it's a unique element of Costa Rica neutrality. I don't know any other country that has this obligation. And the Supreme Court does take that and highlights, and it says to the government, you shouldn't be joining this coalition of the willing. You should be actively engaging in international politics to help bring peace. And the government hasn't really done that. But it's from the legal perspective and from the legal point of view, it's there. The court recalled it. And so going back to the point, if you think of neutrality in this sense, that I will not get involved, I will not escalate, I will not make the thing bigger than it is, and I will provide a space and a place to bring the parties together and end the conflict as a way to achieve peace as one of the goals established in the charter, then I cannot agree on seeing neutrality as a selfish foreign policy. I have to strongly disagree on that point of view. It was very brave from Costa Rica to declare its neutrality in the circumstances it did. And it was very brave from the country to maintain its neutrality in the circumstances that it did in 2004.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a policy for the word.
Yeah. Because neutrality, you know, somebody who put it really beautifully was Urho Kekkonen, the Finnish former prime minister, and he once said, you know, neutrality is not the easiest of all policies because it means that you need to constantly adjust your foreign policy and you need to constantly find new ways to be independent and to stand your ground because you need to defend your own point of view towards everybody, right? Because both of them are going to pressure you, and that's a big misunderstanding. And I'm very glad to know that Costa Rica is actively working on clearing up that misunderstanding, and it's standing its ground as opposed to today's Finland and Sweden, which didn't stand their ground, which gave up their ground, and now they have 15 and 17 military US bases. And now they made themselves a target. If ever there's a NATO-Russia war, they're going to be the first frontline states. And that's the sad reality.
I think that Finland and other
Sweden.
states from the area made a massive mistake when joining NATO and abandoning neutrality. Um, they pretty much added lemon to the scar, you know. They did exactly what the Russians have been complaining about for the past 20 years, which is they kept coming closer to them. If you check at the documents on relations between Sweden and Finland in the last 20 years, they weren't bad, and there were no signs at all of Russian thinking of incursions in Finland by I mean, there was nothing to make the Finns think that the Russians were a threat to them. But they were subject to all this propaganda and the exacerbation of the Ukrainian invasion, which is illegal. I will not discuss whether or not that invasion is illegal. But the fact that that it's that is illegal, it doesn't mean that there are some uncomfortable issues we should talk about this invasion. For instance, I mean, Putin warned everybody in Munich in 2007, if I'm not mistaken, in this very famous speech. And it is true that NATO promised not to expand 1 inch to the east, and they have not done that. And this leads us to a very important discussion that I'm pretty sure many countries don't want to have, which is at which point my security is your threat or your concern. Um, I don't know if it's very harsh from my side to use the situation in the United States as an example. Yeah, you have the right to bear guns for security, so you feel safer. I don't think anybody feels safer now that there's shootings everywhere all the time in the schools every week. Uh, I think last year statistically there were over one school shooting per day in the United States last year. Uh, so are we all safer if you feel safer? At which point a collective security mechanism becomes a collective threat mechanism.
Collective insecurity. Yeah.
Correct. And I think this is a discussion at least NATO is not willing to have, but we should have it. It's the only collective security bloc that is expanding, if you think about it.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Roberto. And it fills me with happiness that you in Costa Rica can see this with so much realist clarity, whereas the Europeans and the Americans too are caught in some strange form of mass delusion that they lack the ability to see what their unilateral actions are doing toward the overall security environment, the security architecture of the Eurasian continent. But it's good that you see that so clearly.